On August 28, 2024, Hypixel released one of its biggest updates to Bedwars, the pre-game name obfuscation update. Their goal was to ensure that players of all skill levels can enjoy the game on a more level playing field, claiming that Q dodging and sniping facilitated by player overlays and third-party programs have long been issues in the Bedwars community. This update was widely controversial and received both positive and negative feedback from the community. Simply put, the update is far from perfect. As we're going on a year since this update came out, has it been beneficial or detrimental to the game? Let's recap and dive into it. As the game got more popular over the years, a new strategy became prominent: overlays. Thousands of players began downloading this external software, which gave them loads of information when they queued into a game. They could see players' live stats like Bedwars level, wins, kills, KDR, and so much more. And with that information, they could then make a snap decision: play the game, or re-queue and find a different lobby. If there are high-level players or known sweats, they could then leave and fish for easier lobbies with newer or casual players. What about these casual players? Well, they were in the dark. They don't have the same information as overlay users, and many aren't even aware that overlays exist, since Hypixel doesn't even mention it, and you have to go outside of the game in order to download it. Wait, hold on, Jaay. Overlays are good for avoiding hackers and snipers. Why are you acting like every overlay user intentionally targets noobs? Look, I know some people used overlays to avoid snipers and cheaters, and that's a big criticism people had with the update. And I will get into that soon, but it still doesn't excuse the fact that so many players using overlays created a serious imbalance in the game that ultimately hurt new players. Overlay users could cherry pick easy lobbies, dodge difficult ones, and grind stats without ever dealing with real challenges. Meanwhile, unsuspecting players became part of that cycle, targeted for easy kills, farmed for win streaks, and likely having no idea why they kept running into the same impossible games over and over again. Now, this does not mean that the update was perfect. It definitely had a ton of flaws. The obfuscation update dropped suddenly, and just like that, overlays were rendered useless in pre-game lobbies, and Q dodging was no longer possible. A lot of players were upset, and the Hypixel forums blew up overnight. A lot of the early backlash was from the other change that came with this update: stars-based matchmaking. There had always been soft matchmaking in the game, with levels 1 to 15 having their own separate queue. Now there are 3 brackets: new players level 1 to 10, slightly less new players level 10 to 50, and everyone else level 50 plus. There was a lot of confusion surrounding this, and many players claim that they're experiencing sweaty games with a dramatic increase in high-level players. Some even claim that every game they played only had 400 plus star players. Since then, it seems like the backlash caused them to fix the bugginess and maybe even adjust the queue in general, since today, as a level 1000, I've been able to queue and play games with several low star players, even as low as level 15, level 20, and so on. So back then, staff could have definitely communicated better with the player base and rolled out the update more smoothly. For obfuscation, players still had a lot of concerns. Yes, sniping is still possible, but it's far less damaging now. API settings were added to allow players to freeze their stats while they're online. Previously, snipers were able to track player data to deduce when and where a player is queuing, and now it is far more challenging. I saw a lot of people saying players were going to toggle hacks in order to get an advantage to fill in the void that overlays left, but I'm not so sure this is as big as people are making it. There was a lot of panic right after the update came out, and now things are much better. But day one, people were dealing with a lot of bugs and were concerned about extremely sweaty games, even to the point that players said they would start hacking. Now, to that I say, if you need an overlay in order to get a leg up on other players, that's a problem with you, and you're going to have to get used to playing Bedwars normally without avoiding tough competition. I feel it's a while since the update came out, bugs are mostly smoothed over, and the community is used to playing like this now. It's funny because this reminds me of how people say bring back the old Bedwars. Meanwhile, back when Bedwars was first released in prototype lobby, overlays didn't exist, and everyone was on the same level playing field. Of course, the community is very different now with the growing problems of cheaters and poor moderation, but that doesn't warrant abusing overlays. And that brings me to Another concern that was raised was how overlays were helpful for dodging snipers or hackers, and even just seeing player names in the pre-game lobbies allowed normal players to avoid a cheater that they just ran into. First, about overlays. Some overlays had features to allow users to flag a cheater or a sniper account, which gave players with overlays access to a whole web of knowledge that others didn't have. And I think this system is still arguably unfair, since a majority of Bedwars players do not use overlays. But the fact that players cannot avoid cheaters anymore by recognizing their name in the pregame lobby is definitely an issue. Now, I can confidently say that this is not as big of an issue, for me at least. Usually when someone is hacking and sniping, I can just random queue and avoid them. I probably ran into the same cheater like 2 games in a row, only once in the past year. But in general, I think a lot of the problems with this update can be attributed to a moderation system that just falls short. Now, according to Plank, Hypixel's anti-cheat bans players quite often, almost at 10 million all-time bans, with the system handing out thousands of daily bans. We will never truly know the inner workings of the anti-cheat, but we can only assume that these numbers come from obvious hacks. I'm talking hacks like scaffold, bee-hopping, and even flying across the map. But there are known hacks that seem to fly under the radar, such as blinking, intentionally lagging yourself mid-fight in order to get an advantage, tracers being able to detect invisible players no matter where they are, bed nuker being able to break beds through blocks, and even anti-KB, which allows players to reduce or cancel their knockback. Players toggle these hacks in specific moments, and I've reported dozens of players for this, and I can confidently say that most of these reports go unresolved. There is a clear issue with the moderation system. On May 31st, 2021, a new rank was introduced, the Game Master. This was a paid position that replaced the volunteer staff team, and the moderator and helper ranks were completely removed. They claimed that the staff-to-player ratio might be small, but the amount of work that each Game Master is able to do, and will be able to do, is quite huge. It balances out at the end of the day, if not exceeding it. Players quickly raised concerns about how a smaller team would lead to less community engagement and generally a bad moderation system. And while these Game Masters might be doing work behind the scenes, the issue here is we don't know. We rarely see staff anymore. Back then, it was common for helpers and mods to linger in lobbies and talk with players, but today, a staff spotting is a rare treasure, and interacting with them personally, not going to happen. There's also a big lack of transparency with what these staff members do on a daily basis. I've had friends tell me that back when there were volunteer staff, if they had a hacker in their game, they were able to message a staff member in a lobby and usually someone got right on it. But this makes me wonder, is the current staff team even spectating games anymore? We assume not, or at least it's gone down significantly after transitioning to a smaller paid team. We can see this with Castles, a game of 40v40 players which rotates in every few weeks. Cheating in this game mode is a much bigger problem since it affects so many more players. Castles today is so filled with hackers and team griefers to the point that some are present game after game with no sign of punishment. Some team griefers even openly brag about doing this for years without ever being punished. This makes players wonder if the staff team is focusing too much on automation through Watchdog, the report system, and even Atlas reviews. And the problem here is, the current report system is not enough. While previously players were able to report people on the forums, the modern day report system is strictly in-game and very broad. You are not able to specify the type of hack, which means the reports are given to staff and players in Atlas without any context. Atlas is a system on Hypixel where players can watch replays of suspected cheaters and determine whether or not they're hacking. The problem is, the reviewer gets no information about the type of hack, the timestamp of the report, and the player who reported them in the first place. All you see is player followed by a number, and then the suspect, and that's it. Some Atlas replays are as long as 50 minutes, and it becomes difficult and time-consuming to determine whether a player is innocent or just being very careful. When Atlas was introduced, it was first described as a way for players to help staff. And if staff use data from these Atlas replays when making their verdicts, it will ultimately lead to a huge level of bias, because most Atlas reviewers will not have the context or the energy to make the right decision, especially when it comes to not so obvious cheaters. With Hypixel staff using Atlas as a means to streamline their process, it is very concerning. The reason that some players complain about the Obfuscation update is because the report system and moderation system is just not equipped enough to deal with these cheaters, so players had to previously moderate games themselves by Q-dodging cheaters and even using overlays to better detect them. But we honestly shouldn't have to do that. Hackers are a problem that everyone has to deal with and has dealt with for years, and claiming that overlays were your only line of defense and therefore a beneficial tool is just wrong, given that the usage of overlays significantly hurt the game for so many players. So the final chapter, is the update good or bad? Well, that's a question you'll have to answer yourself, but for me, I've been playing for years and never used overlays, and honestly, this update has had a positive impact on my experience playing the game. Queuing into games is so much faster since players aren't dodging constantly, and I feel like I don't get targeted as much. If the game wants to grow, we need to move on from the days of overlays, and continue to give new players a cushion to learn the game and really enjoy it. So what now? Well, Hypixel staff should continue to improve the moderation system, strengthen the anti-cheat, and start engaging more with the community. I've been playing this game for 8 whole years, and I really want to see it succeed. And it's up to all of us to voice our concerns to really make Bedwars the best it can be. This is actually my first real video, so if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and feel free to comment your thoughts on the update. I also linked a Hypixel forums post in the description of this video if you want to get involved in the conversation. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.
Coming to you.
Fireball.
No! No! No!
Jaay?
No! No! No!
Wait, it lands.
Oh.
It landed.
Oh my god.
You are so lucky.
What the hell, dude?
So unbelievably lucky.